Hello everybody, my name is Annabelle Cho and I am a product manager with Meissner, specifically working on our final fill and finish portfolio. And for today's presentation, we're going to be talking about technological advances for the optimization of pre-use post-sterilization integrity testing, otherwise known as PUPSIT. To give you an idea of what we're going to be covering today, I have an agenda here. First, we're going to be talking about background. So why are we talking about PUPSIT specifically? Why have we been hearing so much about it in the recent years? Moving on, we're going to talk about PUPSIT itself. So some of the pros, some of the cons, what we are currently experiencing in the industry. Following that, we're going to touch on the advances to PUPSIT technology, specifically talking about barrier filter technology as well as automated integrity testers. And finally, I'm going to demonstrate a PUPSIT process flow using our AccuFlux integrity tester, as well as a sample PUPSIT assembly I have here. At the very end, of course, this is going to be open for some questions, but do feel free to stop me if you have a particular question in any one of these slides. Great, so some background. So why are we hearing so much about PUPSIT in recent years? Short answer is going to be Annex 1. And for those unfamiliar with Annex 1 is going to be the European Union Guidelines for Good Manufacturing Practices. And although Annex 1 has been around for several decades, its most recent revision in 2022, which concentrated on quality risk management as well as contamination control strategies, called upon PUPSIT being a requirement now. So specifically in paragraph 8.87, Annex 1 now states, the integrity of the sterilized filter assembly should be verified by integrity testing before use. Pre-use post-sterilization integrity test, or PUPSIT. So prior to this particular paragraph, Annex 1 did require a pre-use test. However, it did not need to be post-sterilization. So that really subtle difference makes all the difference, because now you're going to be interacting with a closed system once it has been sterilized. So Annex 1 is not requiring PUPSIT, but why are we talking about PUPSIT? What is PUPSIT trying to address? PUPSIT actually helps address a phenomenon known as filter flaw masking. And what filter flaw masking essentially means is that while a filter can be integral when it leaves a manufacturing facility, it can actually gain some sort of damage through the process of transportation and installation. Once that filter is installed and is then sterilized, where it can also acquire additional flaws. And these flaws can actually be masked through the particles found in your fluid. Meaning if you're using a filter and although it passed integrity test when it left the manufacturing facility, you place it now in place where you're going to be utilizing fluid through it, these particles can actually clog that particular flaw, making it be able to pass integrity test post-use. So a flaw in a filter can actually lead to contaminants going downstream of your process, which would be really risk for your patients. So PUPSIT helps address this to make sure that your filter is integral right before you use it. So great, so PUPSIT helps address filter flaw masking. And by the way, this is a focus on prevention rather than detection as guided through Annex 1. So PUPSIT helps address filter flaw masking. However, debate still exists about the need for PUPSIT to be utilized in every single process. Part of the reason is because PUPSIT actually increases system complexity significantly. You'll see here in some of the sample assemblies I have today, whereas before you could have used a very simple line with a filter on it, now you will have a lot of different components in order for you to be able to introduce both water and air into your system aseptically. So with PUPSIT, you're now working on integrity testing filters within a closed system, as well as requiring evacuation of the same fluids downstream of your sterile filter. So typically, the barrier of their filter should not be breached. So while we understand that PUPSIT has a lot of complexity, we are always seeking to make sure that the optimization of this process is in place. And there's been a couple of different technologies that have arisen in the recent years that help address this. One such technology is barrier filter technology. Barrier filters, if you are unfamiliar, are filters that have both hydrophobic and hydrophilic portions within a single component. So here I have an image of what an assembly might look like. You see the filter that's horizontal, it's going to be your product filter. And right downstream of that, you will have 3 different versions of what you can utilize to evacuate fluid through your system. So the first one, you have a barrier filter, which is half hydrophobic, half hydrophilic. The middle one, you have a barrier that's rigid, so it can be a catch can or a flush bottle. And then on the very end, you have a filter arrangement where you have a hydrophobic filter and a hydrophilic filter separate. So you would push your water through one and then your air through the other. There's benefits to having each one of these. However, you will find that, for example, with the rigid containers, you will lose the ability to re-wet and retest, which is the most common reason why a filter fails integrity testing out in the field. So if you're using a bag or a different form of rigid container, you are limited by the volume of the bag on how much wetting fluid you can actually implement into your system. Likewise, with the downstream filter arrangement, where you have 2 separate filters, your operators will have to open and close different valves throughout the process of PUPSIT, hence increasing your risk. And you also have additional lines, which once more increase your contamination risks. So barrier filters have the ability to help simplify this entire process, where you have a single filter for both water and air. So barrier filters have also been around for some time. However, today I want to introduce to you all ZebraGuard, which is Meissner's new barrier filter. ZebraGuard is very unique in the fact that the membrane itself is treated such that the hydrophobic and hydrophilic portions are found within a single sheet of membrane. And you can actually see what that looks like on this image here. That's a piece of our sheet membrane wetted. So the hydrophilic portions will actually get the water soaked into the pores, whereas the hydrophobic portions will have the beads of water right over top of the membrane. And you can appreciate that in this image. So ZebraGuard is going to be that modified PUDF membrane you can utilize as a barrier filter. And although it works as a barrier filter, I think its biggest takeaway is going to be its breathability. Other barrier filters available in the market do not have that same level of breathability. You will actually get a little bit back pressure whenever you are integrity testing the filter, your fluid filter, your product filter. So ZebraGuard has the greatest breathability, and that translates into really great drying times. So to give you an anecdote, we just had a customer who evaluated ZebraGuard in their assemblies, and their assembly drying time was cut down from 1 hour to only 15 minutes through the use of a ZebraGuard barrier filter. ZebraGuard is able to recover its dry airflow in less than 5 minutes at both 30 and 50% at those lower pressures. Great, so that was barrier filter technology. Now moving on to automated integrity testers. So while AccuFlux, once again, is going to be Meissner's automated integrity tester, and it can be compatible with both filter cartridges, capsules, as well as assemblies. What makes AccuFlux so great is going to be the actual test times. So AccuFlux, when compared to the industry, is going to have the fastest industry test times, coming in at around 3 minutes for diffuse flow, around 4 minutes for bubble point. So the reasoning behind that is going to be the technology actually found within the system. The AccuFlux features 3 high accuracy mass flow meters, and it is measuring flow as opposed to pressure decay. We'll run through a demo in just a few moments, but I did want to talk about the way that AccuFlux integrates into PUPSIT. So as you can imagine, and I have here an assembly. See if I can lift this with just one hand. You'll see that these assemblies get really complex and they get really extensive. When using an automated integrity tester, you will have to connect it to your assembly, and you will have to push air aseptically into your system to integrity test the filter of choice. When you are thinking about process times, PUPSIT gets really extensive, so having those shorter test times is going to be critical when you're optimizing your entire system. Something also to note about the AccuFlux, it does not have a warm-up period required. So if you are going to be connecting your system, you can immediately start testing assemblies or cartridges or filter capsules as soon as it powers on. Like I said, more to talk about the AccuFlux once I run through the demo itself. I did want to show you some comparative data that showcases the different test times when it comes to a PES 10-inch cartridge a PVDF 10-inch cartridge, and a PES 50-inch cartridge. As you can see here, AccuFlux is going to have those test times way below the 5-minute mark as compared to 3 alternate suppliers currently available in the market. Great, so moving on to the PUPSIT process flow diagram, I have on the screen an example of a redundant filtration system. Like I mentioned, PUPSIT can get very, very complex. If you had seen this assembly prior to PUPSIT, it could have just looked a single line with 2 different filters there. So part of the reason why you have all these different components is going to be because, once again, you're introducing fluids such as water and air into your system, and you want to make sure that you're doing that aseptically. The system would be gamma sterilized prior to PUPSIT, and you want to make sure that you are keeping the sterility within the assembly. So step 1 would be to actually introduce water for injection. You'll see that being introduced at the top here through a hydrophilic filter. So if you're going down the path, you will see hydrophilic filter introducing water, wetting out your system, letting out the air, and then, of course, coming out through a SeaberGuard barrier filter. Likewise, you will then connect your integrity tester, and you can actually run a filter integrity test. I have the AccuFlux here, so I'll run you through a really quick demo. If you can't see what exactly is going on the screen, you can also find that on the presentation itself. You will first be landed on your test screen where you would select your recipe of choice. I already have a recipe created for this particular assembly, so I will run through that. And then you have a big green button that starts the test. It's as simple as that. I often say that if you can use your phone, you can use the AccuFlux. I continuously do demonstrations in person, and within 5 minutes of somebody learning how to use the system, they're able to run their own tests. So likewise, you would just hit the big green button. You can see the data actually being pulled live on the screen. What I love about the system is how large the screen is. This 15-inch display really is able to give you all of the information you need right there and then, as well as a status bar that tells you exactly where in the process you are. So if you are an operator who is working with PUPSIT, who is working with different filters day in and day out, you're actually able to see the live data and capture any discrepancies ahead of time should there exist. This is really beneficial when it comes to PUPSIT because as you are flowing air through the system, there's a lot of different process connections which can lead to a potential leak. So you want to make sure that your system is capturing any decay in pressure prior to running the test, so you're not spending several minutes waiting for the test to finish for a non-passing filter. So here's what the flow path would look like for the primary filter. You would introduce air aseptically through a hydrophobic filter now. Integrity test your filter of choice, and then of course the air is coming out through the SeaberGuard filter. Likewise, for your secondary filter, you will be introducing air through that secondary filter, integrity testing the secondary product filter, exiting through a SeaberGuard. Finally, you can purge the entire system. We often see people wanting to dry their system to ensure that you're not diluting your product. So you would introduce air through the different valves, exit through the SeaberGuard. Once again, utilizing a SeaberGuard filter is going to be very beneficial. You'll see that having the dual connections at the very end would increase the amount of filters you're actually going to integrity test after use. Finally, you can use your entire line and run product through it. Here we have kept the SeaberGuard, the last barrier filter, on here, but you can also remove that and integrity test the filter in IPA prior to using the assembly. So just to give you a brief conclusion of what we talked about today, we did touch upon Annex 1, so the regulation that is really driving the push for PUPSIT in recent years. Like I mentioned, Annex 1 has been around for several years, and this is the first time we're seeing PUPSIT being called as a specific requirement within this regulatory agency. PUPSIT systems are very complex, and we highly encourage you to partner with somebody who has the technical expertise to be able to provide you the scalability, repeatability, simplicity, and process optimization that come with PUPSIT systems. You'll see here I have an example of you for you, and you're more than welcome to step up after the presentation and actually have a look at what these different components look like. And I can certainly explain what each of these components is here for. Something that I did want to mention really quickly by going back, you'll also find that we at Meissner often use tags, and you will see those as the little flags right next to your filters. That's actually going to tell you exactly what part of the process you are in. So this one says integrity testing, the other one says water for injection. That way you know which of these filters is going to be for water, which one's going to be for air. It's really, really useful when it comes to operators because you have these incredibly large complex assemblies, and you have to make sure that you are opening and closing the right valves at the right times. You do not want to push water into your air filters, and likewise, you do not want to be utilizing your hydrophilic filters for air. That being said, I did want to open up the floor to some questions, and I did want to encourage you to stop by our booth. We're booth number 2343 if you would like to have more information. We do also have the AccuFlux system on hand, so you can get your hands on what the actual system looks like. You can also stop by and grab one of our squishy dogs. It's a pup sitting. And at the very bottom, you'll find a QR code for our new PUPSIT website, which will have all of this information and more you can reference for your needs. Likewise, we'll also have the zebra guard barrier filter. You can have a look at that a little bit closer so you can see what it looks like. Great. Any questions? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me.